You with Chris Bath on 702 ABC Radio Sydney. Time for the Monday Political Forum.
Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends?
And joining me today in the studio, Kerry Chikarovsky, former New South Wales Liberal leader. Chika, lovely to have you with us.
Oh, welcome back.
And thank you. Dr Sophie Scomps, the independent MP for Mackellar, is here.
Good evening.
And Ed Husick, the member for Chifley. Lovely to have you with us.
Great to be with you. Geez, that Tom the Weather fella's all over it, isn't he?
No.
Tom the Weather
Well,
fella. Say that 3 times quickly.
I was listening to the forecast and I was seriously going, how can we have snow above 1,400 metres when it's been so hot? So there you go. Yeah, Tom is all over
very
it.
good.
Frighteningly
He's
all over it. So you can ask him a question without any notice and off he goes. He's the font of
Available for-
all meteorological knowledge.
Yeah, available for all trivia evenings.
So, yeah, imagine that. He'd be an asset. Now, I thought we'd kick off with the Middle East this afternoon. We've seen the first 7 hostages released to the IDF. Donald Trump is about to arrive in Israel. We understand he's been heading to Tel Aviv on Air Force One. We're awaiting the release of 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, 1,700 of them taken during the Gaza war without charge. They are going to be released at some point very soon as well. Ed, let's start with you. Are you optimistic that we're about to see peace in the Middle East? We heard Donald Trump earlier today proclaim the war is over.
I think the best way I could sort of explain to you how I feel is just what's happening today, because it just seems like it's too heartbreaking to think about what might happen down the track. And I feel really, I think like a lot of people would be extremely heartened that the 7 hostages, the families of those hostages, the relief that they would feel would be huge. And obviously there were 13 that I think were still believed alive, 7 released. So that's a massive thing for those families and for the Israeli community. But the other thing is too, for now, the bombing stopping, not having kids go through what they've had to go through, Chris. And the other reality is too, as much as we're happy about today, we've still got a big job to see humanitarian aid flow through. There are still people starving there, and there are still people, particularly kids, that are dying from starvation. So it's really mixed in terms of the emotions. Happy for those Israeli families that can welcome back people that have been just terribly, terribly treated, awfully treated, and all the hostages should have been released a long time ago, but still more work to do.
Chico, what do you think? Do you think we're about to see a cessation of hostilities? Are you optimistic about the future?
So I've got everything crossed that that is going to be the case. My concern, though, is that, we've talked about the fact that there needs to be there's a 20-point peace plan and all of those things need to be complied with. And I'm not entirely convinced that we're going to have the ability or indeed the wherewithal in terms of who's going to implement that plan, who's going to oversee, for example, the demilitarisation of Hamas, who's going to insist that Hamas lay down all their weapons, who's going to insist that Hamas have nothing to do with the further governance of Gaza. I think that if we could actually have the guarantees that those things are going to happen, then we would all be feeling a lot more confident than we are at the moment. But let me echo Ed's words. I, feel a great sense of joy for the Israeli people today, particularly for the families of all the hostages who are being released. And I understand that Hamas have said that the further 13 will be released in the next hour and a half, so they will actually get all the 20 back. But, we can't forget that there were over 1,000 people who died, and those families will never get the joy back into their life. So I think, there is a lot of healing that needs to be done from both sides, but there also is a lot of very practical things that need to be done to ensure there is a peace. And I would say that preeminent amongst all of those things is Hamas doing what they've supposedly agreed to, which is laying down their weapons and allowing another civil order to exist in Gaza so that we can have a proper democracy in Gaza.
Dr Sophie Scomps, where do you sit on this?
Oh, I echo both what Kerry and Ed have said, and that is that it is incredible that we finally got to this stage 2 years on, that the hostages, all the final hostages, are returning home. The Gazan and Palestinian detainees, thousands, hundreds of them are returning back. We've got the flow of aid so that we can stop that starvation, and the bombing has ended. I mean, I don't think many of us thought we would finally get to this, but I do think you asked about optimism. I think there is a seed of hope, but like Kerry said, the international community needs to have utter resolve and commitment to making sure that we get to the two-state solution. This is a tiny step on the way, but I do think the international pressure played a big role in getting to this position, and that we need to continue that pressure. So without that two-state solution, we will not see enduring peace, and I'm sure nobody around the world wants to see this type of horror happen again for the people of Israel or the people of Palestine.
You're listening to the Monday Political Forum. With me today, Kerry Chikarovsky, the former New South Wales Liberal leader, Dr Sophie Scomps, the independent MP for Mackellar, and Ed Husic, the member for Chifley. Let's take a look at Qantas now and these details that have been released on the dark web, the names, the residential and email addresses, the phone numbers, and in some cases birth dates of more than 5 million Qantas customers have been published by hackers on the dark web. They didn't get the ransom they'd asked for. Here's what one affected customer, Liza, told Craig on 702 Breakfast this morning.
They've got everything. They've got name, address, email, date of birth. Oh, they haven't got your points and they haven't got your credit card, but they have my date of birth and my name. Things I can't, like my date of birth, I can't change. My name I could change, I suppose, with a lot of money and a lot of hassle, but I can't change my date of birth. The government needs to put in legislation to treat personal data as a liability. The more a company has, the more liability they hold.
That's one of the affected customers, Liza, with Craig Rucastle on 702 Breakfast this morning. Where's the onus on data safety here? Is it with the government, or is it enough for Qantas to warn customers to remain vigilant, or does corporate Australia need to do more to keep customer data safe? And is it incumbent on the government to make that happen? Dr Scomps, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's up to the corporation that holds the data or owns the data to keep it safe. So you can't just shift the onus for protecting or, keeping safe onto the individual. Sort of said, you need to use two-factor authentication, that type of thing. But there needs to be more happening for corporations to protect this data. And it seems like it was a pretty easy kind of breach in a way, just Salesforce, which, the information had been the holding of the information had been offshored, and it was really quite a simple step to pretend to be an employee that they've now had access to this huge amount of data. And the problem is, or the concern is that data will now be used ad infinitum by other scammers to scam individuals. And so how do we protect ourselves against that? So there does need to be far more corporate responsibility for this incredible holding of data.
Kerry Chikarovsky, where's the onus on data safety here for you?
Oh, well, I agree that Qantas should have stepped up and had a much better protection system in place, a security system in place. I was hacked. I'm one of the people. I got the email from Qantas telling them that they'd taken all sorts of data from me, including all the things that your caller this morning referred to. And, the problem is that, and I'm sure you're the same, I'm already on a daily basis getting extraordinary numbers of scam calls, scam emails. It takes up an enormous amount of my time to actually work out whether they're real or not, and which, is it a real contact from my bank? Is it a real contact from, any of my, in fact, clients?
MyGov's a favourite on my inbox.
Oh, my God, it just drives me insane. So, with all this data now being on the dark web, I can only imagine that I'm going to spend more time having to deal with that stuff. And I am really, really angry about it, because you would have thought that an organisation like Qantas, with, all the sophistication that it has in terms of data that it collects, that it would have had a much more sophisticated data protection system. Yes, I think there's a role for government to step in and say, what the hell are you doing? But at the end of the day, we trust those companies to look after the information which they require from us. You can't book unless you give them all that information, right? You cannot book a ticket. So if they're going to take that information from us, then they have a much, much, much higher level of responsibility to protect it.
Ed Husic?
I can totally understand the concern and the frustration and the alarm from the caller that you played the comment of earlier, Chris, because a lot of those data points are used for identity verification, and so it can't be just dismissed or downplayed that the amount of information's out there, that they haven't got credit cards and frequent flyer detail or whatever. There is enough now information on the dark web for the type of things that Kerry mentioned before can come into play from other actors. And I think the Cybersecurity Minister today, Tony Burke, indicated that there's still no one's ruling out that there won't be a fine for Qantas for what's happened. I think there'll want to be a very clear understanding of what went on between its systems and Salesforce that it was working with, and this is where the breach occurred. And there's a high degree of trust by a lot of companies when they ask people to hand over all this information. And with that trust should come a confidence and assurance that it's extended to members of the public that any of that material, that these firms will take it seriously and that they'll do whatever they can to be able to manage it. And it's only going to get harder too. I think there was another report suggested that AI in particular will form a new front of threats as well that's always testing defences. That shouldn't be used as an excuse by firms, but rather put them on alert. And there have been some breaches, Chris, in times past where there's just been plain old negligence from the firm. It's been a lot of human error where people have been able to access data in a way that is just mind-boggling at how lax it's been. And so I think there will be a greater expectation coming out of the public that these type of breaches will come with significant penalty. And to come to your earlier point and end on this, I think it'll be a mix of both. I think the government's shown at a federal level we're prepared to take further steps to strengthen cybersecurity. If we need to have legislation to do that, so be it. But there will always be an expectation, as there should be, that firms take the possession of the general public's data and their privacy seriously, and they demonstrate that.
You're listening to the Monday Political Forum. With me today, Ed Husic, Dr. Sophie Skomps and Kerry Chikarovsky. A Grattan report came out today from the Grattan Institute. It says household energy bills should halve by 2050. I took a bit of a deep breath when I read that and I thought, 2050? I thought it was going to be a lot earlier than that. Is that going to be enough for Australians who, like me, were kind of expecting their bills to go down much earlier than 2050? Kerry Chikarovsky, you're giggling.
Well, I'll be dead by then. So
You're going to live forever, Chika. Come on.
I won't really care by 2050, let me tell you. But I would hope to think that my family, my children and my grandchildren might get more relief before 2050. I mean, the problem is, and I'll leave it to the experts to talk about how long, and Ed and Sophie will be much better on this than me. But I know that we're moving towards a renewable future, but it seems to be taking a very long time, and it seems to be taking a long time because we don't have the infrastructure in place to actually manage that transition. So, we don't have the power lines. We don't have the ability for us to set up big solar farms out in the middle of nowhere because we don't have the transmission lines to bring it back to Sydney. So all I can say is, as I said, I'll be dead. I don't really care. But I would like to think that before I go to God, that I might have some better relief, because my bills, both in terms of my personal bills and, my business bills, they're continually going up. And as a small business owner, it really is a very, very large impost. So what are we now, 2025? I'd hope by 2030 I might have some better relief, not have to wait until 2050.
Sophie Skomps, was it unreasonable of me to have expected power bills to go down a little more than, by half by 2050?
Look, I think Kerry again, by mentioning that the businesses are really doing it tough, they are. That's one of the things I hear, very frequently, is that the energy bills are really making it hard for them. So I think everyone's hoping that they'll get lower bills. But the other thing is there is going to be the need for a vast expansion of all that electricity infrastructure and transmission. So it is quite interesting to think that even though we have to build up a massive amount of infrastructure, despite that, by 2050 prices will still be going down. So it does show that clean energy is the cheaper form of energy. And hopefully we see that sooner than 2050, and hopefully the prices start going down sooner, because the small businesses and households do need that relief.
Ed Husic, what was your reaction to the Grattan Institute report?
Well,
Had you
So
expected it? Was it?
it reinforced. It reinforced a number of things. I mean, the starting point is, as has already been observed by both Sophie and I think Kerry may have made this point too, in terms of renewables being way cheaper than what's on offer in terms of other energy sources. And that is not a new realisation. That's been around for a while. And I know you don't want to get sort of heavy on the politics of it, and I will absolutely try to adhere to that. But if we've had last 10 years of blues over energy policy where we've had over 20 of them come up with the previous government, none of them landed, fights in there about whether or not to get net zero, which is still going on today. It just delays the ability for us to be able to make that transition and puts back when consumers can see the benefit of that. And if we've got coal-fired power stations that are ageing and have to go offline, you have to have a new source of energy to come in and replace that. And so we are well behind the starters block given where we've been, but we are trying to make headway on that. I think there are a number of other things that are worth noting. On to Kerry's point about transmission, absolutely correct. In fact, the biggest reason why we've had some of the spikes in electricity prices in particular is because we haven't been able to roll out transmission enough. And again, there are some political campaigns that are being run by our opponents to make that a difficult process. We just have to get that sorted. The other thing that we're doing is, everyone knows Australia's really embraced the idea of solar power, and you've seen that per capita we've got some of the best solar take-up in the world, taking advantage of some of the best solar available anywhere in the world, and teaming that up with the batteries that we're trying to make easier for people to buy at their homes and store will mean that there'll be a lot of people that will get some of those savings a lot earlier, Chris.
Well, it's a big
But it is
investment up front, though.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. And there needs to be, and there is some work being done, particularly for social and affordable housing, where we need to make that more available for people on lower incomes. But there are some that are making some savings now. We need to speed that up, and it's just a matter of trying to make up for lost time in many respects.
You're listening to the Monday Political Forum on 702 ABC Radio Sydney. With me, the member for Chifley, Ed Husic, Dr Sophie Scomps, the member for Mackellar, and Kerry Chikarovsky, former New South Wales Liberal leader. There was an article today, a former Supreme Court judge was among the legal experts sounding the alarm about the biggest overhaul of planning laws in New South Wales in 50 or so years. Environmental groups are also alarmed. They're worried it's going to put new powers that bypass environmental checks in the hands of just a few people and potentially create corruption risks by putting that power in the hands of just a few people. Here's what Greens MP Sue Higginson told me a little earlier on Drive.
Of course, everybody wants a good, effective, fast planning system. Everybody wants that for consistency and certainty. But it would be absurd to take some backward steps, throw out anti-corruption safeguards, throw out long-standing protections that have delivered good outcomes for communities across the state. So I am literally pleading with all reasonable MPs at the moment, look, this is the planning system. It is very important. Let's not rush it. Let's get it right. The government can still get what they need before the end of this year. Let's just have a good look at this together.
It's Greens MP Sue Higginson with me earlier on Drive. Kerry Chikarovsky, she says that we need to have parliamentary oversight of the legislation. We need to take a deeper dive into it, a closer look at it, give ICAC a chance to maybe have a look at it and go through it. Do you think there are dangers in what the government's proposing to do with planning laws?
Well, my understanding was that ICAC was consulted on it.
Well, there's been a bit of debate over that today, a bit of argy-bargy. I'm not sure whether it's just semantic or not. You know, the planning minister said that they had input, but not specifically into the legislation that's been written. Who knows?
So, yeah, I mean, it's always a complicated process to negotiate legislation of any type in a parliament which has got the composition that it has upstairs in the New South Wales Parliament. Look, I actually think there are two very distinct problems here. The first problem is that we have a planning system which has for a very long time prevented development, and that in large measure was because There's been a lot of NIMBYism around it. You know, people haven't wanted, and I speak from experience, I declare an interest. I've done some work with developers. I'm not doing any work at the moment, but I have. But there's been a lot of NIMBYism which says that, you know, we don't want high rise in our area. And whether it's 3 stories, 4 stories or 20 stories, we don't want it in our area. And the government has quite rightly identified that they need to actually put a level of high rise, particularly around transport modes. And I think that is a good policy. The difficulty, on the other hand, is that people are saying that the decisions about it are going to be made by a limited number of particularly bureaucrats. I have less concern about that process, mainly because there is still a level of transparency around what's happening. The government has designated areas, they've given some design guidelines, they're saying that this is the sort of development that they want. And I think provided people are clear about what those guidelines are, then there should be a level of transparency about the approvals. If there are problems, if there are ways in which people or things that people are objecting to, then perhaps there needs to be some sort of process where you can actually have those objections transparently considered as well. And that, I think, starts to address the issue. But the reality is, Chris, that unless we start to pick up the pace, we are going to be further and further behind in terms of delivery, and less, particularly young people, are going to be able to afford to live in Sydney. And we don't want that to happen. We want this to be an affordable city, and we want people to be able to live, work, play close to where, close to the city, and not, 120 kilometres away with so cozily a very fast train that's going to bring them in at some stage, which I also think is pie in the sky, but that's another issue for another day.
Very fast train's been going round and round for years. Dr. Scomps, do you think there are risks in theoretically reducing the red tape in the rush to fix the housing shortage?
Oh, definitely. I do think there's risks, and I think we have to be careful that while we turbocharge approvals, we're not turbocharging the opportunities for corruption. I think Anthony Whealy, who is the former Supreme Court judge for New South Wales, he did well to remind us that the New South Wales government hasn't got a great history when it comes to their relationships with property developers. So we do know we have to be very careful if we're removing those safeguards against corruption, and this does concentrate the power of those decisions very much in the hands of a few people, and particularly the Minister for Planning. So I think these things, we do need to take time to make sure that we get the laws right to start with. And so any further oversight or deliberation, I think that's reasonable.
Ed Husick?
We've got to build, in particular in my area, I'm really focused on getting more social and affordable housing. I live in a council area in Blacktown that does pretty well on approvals. And we've also had to live, as much as this has been the focus of discussion today, Chris, we've had this in terms of projects of state significance that have overruled councils for the best part of 20 years. So I don't see it as anything new. I think always have the mechanisms in place to make sure that the right thing is done, absolutely. And we need to make sure that the decisions that are made stand the public test as well in terms of being properly made. But there are still a lot of councils that will still resist giving the development approvals that are required, and that is a potential handbrake and does make it hard. And there's a lot of what Kerry said that I absolutely agree with. We need this to be a city where you can live, work, play in your local area as much as you possibly can, instead of making people just do this torturous trip from the western part of the city to the east, and it's just taking longer and longer no matter how much improvement to infrastructure we make.
Dr. Scomps, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I do want to ask you about the Parliamentary Sports Club. You've quit it. It's banned Senator David Pocock for raising concerns about the gambling industry sponsoring it. Then they've said, you can come back, Dave. Can you answer this question for me? How did politicians not know earlier than this that the gambling industry sponsored the sports club?
I think it came out. I mean, I had a look. The website's been taken down, but I had a look at the website previously, and it wasn't published on the website that Responsible Wagering Australia was a corporate sponsor. And so and I've had multiple conversations as well with the gentleman that runs the sports club, and it never came up that there was the opportunity for corporate sponsors to rub shoulders with their politicians. So, look, the other thing is sometimes we get a lot of correspondence, and there are newsletters. I only just recently joined again, but certainly I don't think that there was any reading of the fine print at the bottom of one of those long letters. And I think it came out because there was an event called Run for Resilience, which was a suicide prevention. And then it became clear that Responsible Wagering Australia, which is a lobbying agency that lobbies for the gambling industry, basically, they came out and put a post up on social media saying that they had been involved in this event. And I don't think anyone really was aware of that. And it was sort of quite a cynical kind of, soft way in. And so,
Dr. Scops, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. We're going to get to the news. Thank you very much for explaining that to us. Appreciate it. And Eddie Usick, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
And Kerry Chikarovsky, always great to see you.
Great to be here.
The news is coming up next. Then you've got Evenings with Renee